There we go. I'm Steve Walsh. I'm the military and veteran reporter for KPBS in San Diego. We're also part of a coalition of public media stations around the country called the American Homefront Project, which looks at military and veterans issues. This is the first of 2 live events we're sponsoring on race and the US military. Next Thursday, we'll look at how the military copes with white supremacy. Today, we're looking at racial bias in the military. After the death of George Floyd at the hands of Minneapolis police, the military began a series of efforts looking at racial bias. Secretary of Defense Mark Esper created a Pentagon commission. There were some quick reforms put into place, like banning the use of photos during promotion reviews. In this hour, we're going to try to give you an overview of some of the big issues. We have Michael Johnson, who is with the Munford Point Marines Association, a Vietnam-era vet. His organization formed in the years after World War II, when African-American Marines were not always welcome in traditional veterans organizations. His group is still very active today. Also, we have the services are encouraging rank and file troops to talk about their own biases. So how do you do that? To talk about it, we have Stefan Williams. He runs a leadership training firm in Melbourne, Florida. A retired Marine, Williams worked with the Defense Department to facilitate conversations on racial bias. He still works with Marine units as a consultant. Heads up, we want volunteers to talk about their own experiences, and we plan to take your questions. So raise your hand in the chat. One of the areas that the Navy is examining is racial bias in the military justice system. We have Don Christensen, who is president of Protect Our Defenders. He's a retired Air Force colonel and military prosecutor. His group focuses on issues involving sexual assault, but they have also studied racial disparities in the service. And lastly, we have Rear Admiral Sinclair Harris. He retired in 2015 after 34 years in the US Navy. Harris is president of the National Naval Officers Association, which seeks to encourage diversity in the naval community. He is also a senior advisor to the One Navy Task Force, which is scheduled to make recommendations to the head of the Navy on ways to eliminate racial bias in the service. We're going to start with Admiral Harris. So, Admiral, if you could kind of frame the issue for us. Why does the military see itself as having a problem, and why do they care about rooting out racial bias?
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate it. Forgot to hit the unmute button. And it's great to be on such a distinguished panel. The issue of racism in the military goes back to its earliest days. It has come and gone in terms of its level of importance to the leadership in the United States military, and certain events such as, for this time, the George Floyd murder caused many to again reassess how they're valued in our military. In fact, I was just talking earlier today to a young midshipman at the Naval Academy who, along with many other midshipmen of color at the Naval Academy, were questioning why should we continue to serve in a nation that doesn't seem to always appreciate us? And I had to give them some encouragement about why. But this is a challenge that continues. We're a part of America. We're a microcosm of America. And America's got institutional racism in it. And we come from that same group of human beings. And why is it important? It's important because in a time, and it's not just about doing nice things for Black people. In a time when we have so many complexities to the warfighting environment, it is a strategic imperative that we get the best out of all of our men and women, regardless of race, regardless of creed, regardless of gender, regardless of orientation. We get the best out of all of them, because the more diverse and inclusive an organization is, every study will show that it is more innovative, more creative, more resilient, and better able to take a holistic view of the challenges that we have coming. So it's a strategic imperative, and I believe that the service chiefs and Secretary of Defense understand that.
But by the same token, the Navy has looked at racial bias since, well, at least the 1970s, when the head of the Navy, Admiral Zumwalt, made inclusion a real issue and instituted a whole series of reforms. But we're still looking at it today. So, I mean, now there are efforts at the Department of Defense, each of the services. How are these efforts going to be any different from what we've seen in the past?
Steve, great and tough question. We have to understand that progress is never a straight, smooth line. You may take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. That is just a matter of it's a matter of fact. So you mentioned Admiral Zumwalt. And the picture behind me is of Admiral Sam Gravely, who is the first African-American in the Navy's history to make flag. And that was during Admiral Zumwalt's era. He was the only one for a while. Frank Peterson was the only one for the Marine Corps for a while. Today, we have about 5 or 6 African-American flags. When I was still in uniform, we had up to 16, including a female 4-star, Michelle Howard, a male 4-star, Cecil Haney, and of course before them was J. Paul Reason. So the numbers have gone up and down, which is not right. But what it shows you, though, is that there has been progress, but progress is not sustained without the institution investing in the recruiting, the retention, and the career development of all the members of the force.
We have a picture up on the screen right now. This is, I think this is 2018. This is the top leadership at the Pentagon with President Trump. It looks incredibly white. And I'm not, this is not a ding on President Trump. It didn't look much different, but in the Obama or the Bush years either. So, I mean, one of the issues here is you do not have very many officers, top officers in any of the service branches. Why is that?
So, and as you can see here, you've got General Brooks, Vince Brooks. He was there, now he is retired, and his relief is General Brown, 1. That is not satisfactory. I don't see any women in this picture. And women have taken a continually more and more important role in our military. It goes back again to the 3 things that I know we talked earlier, the 3 things that everybody needs to succeed, whether you're talking about the military or civilian or any other part of life. Everybody needs mentoring, everybody needs coaching, everybody needs advocacy. And those are 3 different things. So mentoring, I think most everybody understands a decent definition of what a mentor is. It can come from 360 degrees, people above you, below you, beside you, on any number of topics. Coaching, what do coaches do? They get players ready for the field. They get people prepared to take on the tough jobs in order for them to take those key roles. And then the third one, and this is the more difficult one, is advocacy. And in the selection boards that we have in the military, as you go up in rank, those selection boards get tougher and tougher and tougher, no matter what service you're in. If you don't have people who are advocating for you, and in this case, advocating for people that may not look like you, then it's very difficult to break through. I know probably 3/4 of the gentlemen in this picture. They are fine men. But I asked them and I asked their current flag officers and generals this question: who are you mentoring? Who are you coaching? And who are you advocating for? And if they all look like you, then the picture is never going to change.
Yeah. But this is also a numbers game, isn't it? You have to have a lot of people coming into the service that that 20 years from now are ready to step up and become that 2-star, 3-star, 4-star admiral. And right now, the Naval Academy, I believe it's like 5 or 6% of the incoming graduating class this year is African American. It doesn't sound like that pipeline is very secure right now.
Well, You're talking about a very key thing, and you use a great term, the pipeline. So the first thing is you got to have a large influx. I think it takes about 3,000 ensigns to make one captain. And I'm sure it's some other huge number like that where you look at the other services. It takes a lot just to get the right quality cut, because you're not going to promote somebody who's not qualified for the position, especially to get more senior. So number one is you have to have a large number coming in, and that means you need to recruit from where they are. If you always fish in the same river, all you're going to eat is trout. Okay, you've got to go to where the diverse populations are: Black, Hispanic, women, Asian, all that. Then you mentioned pipeline. So there are leaks all along the pipeline. Okay, there are leaks at their first, when they finish their initial requirement, 5 or 6 years in as a officer in any of the military. That's a natural break point where a lot of people get out for any number of good reasons. We hope that one of them is not because they don't have a sense of belonging in the organization. We hope that that has been built up. That's what helps keep people pushing on through, and their families. Then the next one is at 20 years, it has changed because of some of the retirement rules that have changed, but generally speaking, around 20 years. And again, this is at a point where if you don't see a promotion on the horizon, what are you doing? Why are you staying there? Especially given all the things that you're making your family and yourself put up with. Again, that goes back to those other points I talked about, advocacy and coaching being among the most important of those things to get through there.
We've got our first question for you from the audience, and I wanted to give you enough time to be able to respond to it. And the question is, how do we start these discussions when leadership in the military are not tolerant of these discussions because it's political?
I would disagree with that statement. I believe that the leadership, I know the leadership in the Navy, in the Coast Guard, in the Marine Corps, because I talk to them on a regular basis, have opened their minds. You can see it in any number of videos and listening to sessions. I've been a part of them. My other fellow flag officers have been as well. So I believe that they're more open-minded than that. The challenge is, how do you keep the pressure on as the next thing happens on the news cycle and takes attention away? How do you sustain the effort? And the other challenge is, how do you get down from the 4 stars that you saw in that previous picture down to the colonels, down to the lieutenant colonels, down to the captains, down to the commanders, because they're writing the fitness reports for those new officers, those lieutenants, those O3s, okay? They're writing their fitness reports, and they can cause what I call the death valley to happen, where you have fitness reports that do not promote you and promote a sense of belonging to a young officer, and they decide to get out. Plus, they've got other people, IBM, Facebook, Google, other people who are looking for talented young men and women of color. And so you've got that drawing them out as well. That's another leak in that pipeline.
Yeah. And it really is a matter of, it's not all test scores and just basic performance reviews. You really have to understand, if you're going to become an admiral in the Navy, there's a whole process. You have to reach certain milestones. You really do need to have somebody who is mentoring you and moving you along the process.
Absolutely. And I think that is true no matter which industry, academia, or any place else. If I've talked to people, that the words, and I use them intentionally: mentoring, coaching, and advocacy, those 3 things are all required in order to make progress. I was very fortunate. Again, when I retired, there were 2 African-American 4 stars who had been coaches and advocates for me. And there are other majority officers as well who have been coaches and advocates for me. You don't have to look like somebody to be a coach or advocate, but you got to have it in your heart.
All right, we're going to try to bring in a veteran voice here. We've got Keisha Jevis-Jones. She's director of the education program at Workshops for Warriors here in San Diego. She is a former Marine. Keisha, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
So tell me a little bit about your service.
So I spent 10 years in the United States Marine Corps, where I deployed to Iraq as a female search team advisor, and which also known as a lioness. I was administrator when I first joined. I became a reserve career planner, and then that ended me up on I&I duty, where I was a funeral honors coordinator for Western New York, as well as the Toys for Tots coordinator.
Now, we had a little conversation earlier, and I wanted you to take the audience through this. You headed up an honor guard in upstate New York, and you had
That is correct.
that that really kind of highlighted how difficult it can be when people are not comfortable with you and your position. Tell us about it.
Yes. So being a part of funeral honors to me was a great honor to be able to, one, recognize my brother and sister for their service, and be the last person to hand that to their next of kin. In upstate New York, and many times we would strive to provide honors for a family. And you could tell by the looks on the faces, the glares, that I was not wanted there by the color of my skin. So at that point, you have to go through in your head, well, one, I know for a fact that I'm going to honor my brother and or sister because they serve this country and they deserve to be honored. And that is what we as the honor guard do in their lasting memories. So how do I, as a service member, and this is being my job, make sure I respect the family and still make sure I honor my brother and my sister without showing total disrespect for their family and their family's wishes for me not to be there. And a number of times I would have to step back and let my junior Marines who came to do other duties take on that responsibility as I remain in the car. And it was just, unfortunate that someone would not honor the fact that, one, I'm serving, I'm a Marine, and they would look at me as just being a Black female that they did not want to have present.
Yeah. I mean, what do you do? What's going through your head at that point? You're there to give the most solemn honor in the Marine Corps, to be there at that funeral, to honor that fallen Marine. What's going through your head?
So at one point, for the first one, I would say I was very hurt because you would hope that everyone would honor the fact that you've given the ultimate sacrifice to serve this country. Myself being a combat veteran, I've gone through a number of things, just as many other combat veterans out there have gone to, and left my family to serve this country for all the freedoms and rights that we have. So putting pride aside and still remembering my brother or sister who's laying there may or may not have the same views, and that really does not matter. But knowing that I'm there to, one, represent the United States Marine Corps, to two, represent the honor of this nation, and three, I have to be the utmost professional and not let my personal feelings get the best of me in that moment. So I just had to, I'm from South Carolina. I should have mentioned that. And I have been victim of racism and sexism in many different aspects of my life. I have to be the most professional and find out, one, dig deep inside and say, you know what, I don't know what this individual's family is feeling, but I do know that they took the same oath that I took, and I must honor them for what they did and not let their family take anything away from them in the lasting moments where the United States military and DOD is going to honor them.
We've got if you could stay on for just a second, we're going to have Stefan Williams on there, but we have another question from the audience, and I wanted to make sure I get to that. And this is from a military spouse. What do you do when our service members face retaliation by the chain of command for reporting racism? Any one of our guests want to take that one?
Yes, I'll take that one. That is something that happens a lot, and it's very very tough for the actual service member to try to believe into the system that is in place to actually address these issues. And the best thing I can tell you is to take it to another level. It doesn't stop at the command. You can go all the way up to headquarters Marine Corps, headquarters Navy, and you got to keep pushing it. You got to keep pushing it. And once it's in the right people's hand, things change. They send people from outside of the organization to come in and do another investigation where there's no internal influences on the outcomes. And most of the time it stops at the command level, and which is hard, but a lot of these individuals don't want to go anymore because of the retaliation, because of the reprisal that happens when you do report. So I would say take it to the next level.
And we're talking to Stefan Williams here. And Admiral Harris?
I agree with Stefan completely. I would also say if it doesn't work at that, that's why you have a congressman.
Okay, I mean, that all sounds well and good though, but we just talked about how hard it is to advance in the military and how you have to have all of the right mentors and everything has to be squeaky clean. If you complain, I've talked to African-American officers who feel that once I complained, I suddenly, for some reason, became the problem, not the actual racist incident. You're telling me that they'll be able to do that and have no impact whatsoever?
I'm not saying that it'll have no impact. I'm not saying that people aren't hurt along the way. What I'm saying is that when I look through the history of the Golden 13, the Marine Corps Pathfinders, the first African-American women to join the military, I look at all the predecessors that put up with far more than I did, and they stood up and they spoke up, and they may have had to take a hit so that I could progress. It would be a dishonor not to do that. And we need to keep pressing forward. It won't be perfect. There are going to be people that take casualties. There's always war and casualties, but they have to keep pressing forward.
But when that casualty is somebody's career, isn't that why we don't have 3- and 4-star admirals in the Navy?
And if we shut up, we're not going to get any farther. So you have to keep pressing forward to make change work.
Okay. All right, so I hadn't formally introduced Stefan Williams here. He's a facilitator from Melbourne, Florida. It's been his job to, facilitate just these kinds of discussions here. And it's just ironic. I wish this segment wasn't as timely as it keeps becoming, but just today, NPR released a poll saying about 36% of Americans say they've taken some concrete step or action to better understand racial issues after George Floyd's killing. Only about 30% of white Americans have done that. I mean, that's better than none, right? But it sounds like we have a very long way to go, doesn't it? Stefan?
Yes, culture change takes time. It's incremental. And the thing about the racism inside of America, anything that's in society is in our military. The only thing that's different, we are more closely related to each other, and we under this one umbrella, Marine, Navy, soldier, whatever it may be, that kind of keeps us intact. However, those racial ideologies still permeate throughout the culture of the Marine Corps, the Navy, all services. So it's going to take some time. It's definitely going to take some time for us to make that turn, but we can't forget, if you go back 60 years, where are we? Something that's been going on for hundreds of years, policies that were written, laws that were put in place, those things, the things that we are still trying to get over. So it takes time to change a culture. It takes time to change a behavior that has been deeply rooted in our country's soil, in our country's military, in our country's law enforcement, in our country's businesses. It doesn't stop there. So what I would tell you is basically we got to keep moving forward. We got to keep having these conversations. One thing in the military I would tell you that we can no longer do anymore. As a military member, as a Marine, I'm well trained. That means if somebody busts through my door, instantly I'm going to react without thinking because I'm trained to react to a stimulus. However, we need to educate. We can't do check in the box training all the time and think that, hey, we got the roster, we're good to go. No, we must educate now. We must educate. And one of my mentors, my biggest mentor, who I'm still in contact with today, is Jane Elliott. And when I came across her brown eyes, blue eyes experiment, and I highly encourage anyone that's watching this, go and watch that on YouTube. 14 minutes will change your life. Race is a social construct. It's about power differentials. It's not about biological differences. It's about power. And when you understand, it doesn't matter what color you are, it depends on who writes the laws, who controls the laws of the land, who has the resources that will determine who has more and who has less. So we have
Okay.
to.
All right. Well, you're the educator here. So, and going along with these efforts at the Department of Defense and at the Navy, they've talked about having these deck plate conversations.
Yeah.
Rank and file Marines, rank and file sailors, soldiers, they need to discuss these issues with one another and talk about their biases with one another. All right, so give us the rules. How do you go about doing that, and so you can have a productive conversation?
Now, are you talking about at the higher organizational level or just at the lower level?
What you do with your facilitation, right there, you know, person to person. The CNO is asking people to do that kind of a conversation. How do you do it in such a way?
Well, it has to be set up properly. First, the first thing that needs to happen, the head must get in front of this. The head must get in front and say, hey, this is something important that we need to address. And it cannot be a canned speech. They need to reveal who they are and what their beliefs are so that people can say, okay, you know what? I can identify with you as saying, hey, we know these things are in our society. I have some biases myself. However, at this point, at this time, we must all open up to have this dialogue. Now, so the head must get up front. That means the leadership must get up front. Second, the environment must be safe. You got to create a safe environment, a psychologically safe environment, meaning that if I have a viewpoint that's different from yours, whoever's mediating that conversation should be able to keep everybody in a I would say in a neutral state. So if Sinclair says something like, hey, I disagree with you, Stefan, about that, and I'll allow him to speak, you know, the facilitator would set rules up, say, hey, don't say I disagree. Say, you know what, Stefan, I have a different perspective than you have. Allow me to share. Because the thing, we got to keep down the defenses. So if a person feels that it's comfortable enough for them to speak on what they believe, now we can have an open dialogue as long as it's mediated properly. Everybody can't talk about this. You can't push them in an auditorium. You can't push them in a classroom without someone who's professionally trained to help mediate that very volatile conversation. So you got to put the leadership up first. Two, you got to set some type of norm to create a safeguard for everybody in the room so they want to share. They might have a different perspective. Teach them how to share, because everybody doesn't know how to communicate in the Marine Corps. And just in the military, you know, we mostly, hey.
I've heard that about the Marine Corps. Yeah.
Yeah. Shut up and get it done. You know, shut up and get it done. You know, grow thick skin. You know, and that's kind of how we culture to talk about things. However, with this conversation, I need to be open to hearing a different perspective off the bat.
And I think we've talked about this.
Yes.
What you can't do is come in and try to have a debate.
Yeah, no debating.
No debate. So you want to be able to be open and communicate with one another and be there mostly to learn, right? And to actually hear.
Yes. You got to come in with a open mind, and you can't come in to debate somebody else's experience. Just because it didn't happen to you doesn't mean it doesn't happen. You know, and I've seen it happen many times. Someone, well, I never experienced that. That doesn't mean it didn't happen. So you have to be open to something different. You got to listen empathetically to understand where that person's coming from, you know, and try to see what's happening in their world, in that military culture. You have another question?
No, Keisha, I wanted to bring her back into the conversation. She's had to lead Marines, I know, at various points where she kind of didn't know where they were coming from. Can you talk to us a little bit about your own experience?
Yes. So I'm going to go back to what Vera Harris was saying earlier about mentorship, coaching, and advocacy. I totally agree. One of the things that I will say in the Marine Corps we're really good with is once a Marine, always a Marine, right? The other thing is we start off with a family. Now, I will say that when I first joined the Marine Corps, as early as boot camp, there were many people that had never actually had a conversation with the African American woman. They've never seen my hair texture. They wanted to touch my hair. But instead of shutting those individuals off, you have to be open to the conversation. Let them ask the questions. Let that be a part of the education that they're missing because of where they're from. I was also faced with individuals that came from a very racist homes. And I think it's really about opening up and letting them hear the honest you, respecting where they come from without being overbearing. And then also speaking to other individuals that you see them already engaging with about what you see in them and how they can help you. So that was a lot of what I did when I had those situations.
Did you ever run into subordinates where it's like, these people do not like me? Can you tell? I mean, is it overt?
Oh, you can tell. Be in you giving an order or direction and they just blatantly ignoring you to the Snickers behind your back, whatever that may be. You can tell. And really the way to address it is usually not head on because they already have such a bias against you from either their upbringing or where the social norm of where they have come from. And so you have to penetrate that very differently. And usually it's with education and understanding and starting those hard conversations. Where I came from, I'm from South Carolina. So I was one of the only African-American girls in the classroom up until I was in middle school. There was no African-American males either. Racial slurs started in elementary school. So I knew what that looked like prior to joining the service. And I know even young how I dealt with it. And a lot of it was being open, knowing that they learned that somewhere else. It's not right. Having the hard conversations to help them learn to respect you, your leadership role, and your understanding and respect of where they came from.
Stefan, are there some people that you just don't try to address? Like, are there some people that are just not ready for it? And I mean, if there's a situation where you're a leader, you're going to have to address it on some level, but actually trying to get in there and really change people's understanding. There's some people that they're really not ready to hear.
Yes, there are many people who aren't ready to hear. To try to change a person's belief system, it's like pulling teeth. They're going to hold on what they believe in. And you got to think about this. Racism is taught. You've been indoctrinated over and over from whoever brought you up and what we see in society, and you start to see those stereotypical behaviors of the people that you've been told that, hey, they are savages, they are thieves, whatever it may be. You cannot even see the person for who they are because you're looking through your lenses that have already been pre-made for you by your caregivers, whoever that may be. So some people you got to know when, hey, I'm not even going to push the button to go there. You don't waste your time, you don't waste your energy. But the thing that I love about the military is that, and I had it happen to me hundreds of times, people who come in with racist beliefs and stuff from different places. That's why recruiters strategically place certain places, because that's what she ran into, one of those places that they want a certain type of recruiter there, right? So what I'm saying is that because of the close proximity with me and my leadership, because of them getting a chance to know who I am and watching me treat them with dignity and respect, it made them shift their own way of seeing people. It made them believe that, what, I think what I was told was a lie because you're not like what I thought you were, what was in my mind. So the close proximity in the military, that helps a lot of people get over the racism thing. General Stewart of second MLG, Second Marine Logistics Groups at Camp Lejeune, where I was doing before the COVID thing happened, he got up front and told a very personal story to all his colonels and sergeants majors. And it opened everybody up. That's why I'm saying the head has to get in front of the body first before we move. And then people felt safe enough to say, you know what, I was raised to be a racist, and I'm a sergeant major. And yes, I still have some of that stuff in my mind. However, I try not to act upon it. So the close proximity in the military kind of makes ours a little more covert. You got some people who are a little bit more overt, the ones you can't talk to. However, the exposure, like she was saying, we got to be exposed to things that are different from us. And we got to be open and learn what those things are, and not to stretch it out because I know our time is tight. But one of the things that I always done as a Marine leader, as a facilitator of equal opportunity in the military, I say I go back to the Marine Corps leadership principles. Know yourself and seek self-improvement. Set the example.
Okay.
Know your people and look out for their welfare. If you're not actually putting those things in practice, you're not being a total Marine, because every Marine isn't green, and you need to know who they are, where they come from, the best way to connect with them so we can get the best out of them through mentoring, coaching.
So we have another question from the audience. In such a political and racially polarized time, how do you engage service members, even those senior to yourself, when their point of view just doesn't sound like that they're ready to hear this? How do you engage somebody that is more senior to you on these topics? How do you call them out?
Well, that is a very difficult position to be in because of the power differential and how we are conditioned to be obedient to authority, right? So it's hard to call them out, because here goes the survival thing. We're always in survival mode. If I do this, would it jeopardize my safety, my well-being, my security? Should I say something? Most of the time, people won't say anything. So what I tell people to do is create allies and manage the right relationships, because I might need to go get, Sinclair, could you come and have a conversation with so-and-so about this, or something he said or something she said? You got to learn how to use your relationships to address certain issues, because I can't do it straight on. I might need to get somebody else to speak for me.
All right, so I kind of want to really end on this one. And what do you need from people who are white, people like me who are white, who from that NPR survey are the most reluctant to address these issues? What do you need to hear from us? What do we need to do to really get this conversation going?
Well, for the military, correct? So here's the thing that I say it, and anybody on the panel, if you agree with me, please speak up. If we continue going the way we're going right now, I did 21 years, and I've been out since 2014, came back and did some things with the military. It is a threat to national security for us to be that splintered. We are too splintered. So if I can't trust my brother and my sister to my left, to my right, to have my best interest in mind, we're not a force in readiness anymore. Matter of fact, it's fraud, waste, and abuse if we don't give everybody equal opportunity to ascend to the highest levels of their abilities. Fitness, merit, and what else? Abilities. That is how we're supposed to judge people. Military environment is supposed to be a meritocracy. It's about what you bring to the table, not what I look like, not what my sex is like. And if leaders can kind of get themselves wrapped back around there, we can be good. However, to answer your question a little more directly is this. If you see things being done, it is your responsibility to speak up. You have to be an ally. We didn't get this far by ourselves. We got here, like the Admiral said, through having coaches and mentors who didn't look like us, because we're not in a position of power. So you have to speak up. And there's something.
Say something.
You got to say something. You can't be a passive bystander with this type of stuff. Even on the streets, if I'm being harassed, a bully, just if you stood to the left of me, just to watch what's going on, I don't feel alone. I feel that at least somebody's there to capture this. Somebody's there for me that don't look like me. Because when I look at me, I say, you don't have any power. I need somebody with power, somebody they respect. So say something, speak up. Pull your camera out, pull that person to the side, even say, hey, look, I see what happened. It was wrong, and it shouldn't have happened that way. Let me help you address this issue. That is what needs to be done. We need to go.
It's really as simple as that. How often do people who are white reach out and ask legitimately, or start engaging in a conversation? I don't know if you want people asking questions, but how often do whites approach any of you and talk about, any?
Very often. Very often. I'm always on the phone.
Very often. Well, you, because you're a facilitator, right? But yeah. Anybody who doesn't know who you are and what you do?
Well, I would say even in my social gatherings or when I'm going around, I'm a very talkative person. I greet everybody with brotherly and sisterly love. Hey, how you doing? What's going on? And just because I don't look threatening all the time, they might be open to having a conversation with me. And it done happened recently at Publix. A guy in a parking lot dropped my debit card. Come to find out, he was a Navy veteran. And he said, "Oh man, you're a Marine." And we started talking, and he wanted to talk about what was going on. And he said, "Hey man, we're not all like that." I said, "I never thought you were." You know, and we hugged, and he looked at me, tears, you know, welled up in his eyes, because he thought he was going to probably be rejected. You know, when we start to connect with our humanity, you know, that's when we start to see really how this stuff was supposed to work. You got to meet people where they are and coach them to where you want them to be, or help mentor them to where you want them to be. You know, and it takes time. You know, you got to be patient, but you got to be persistent.
All right.
I just real quick.
Oh,
I,
Admiral.
I sent a letter out to my NNOA members on the 31st of I think it was May. And it was because a lot of people were reaching out to me, asking me the questions you're asking. And I said to them, I said, there are three things you need to do. You need to speak up, but speak up with passion, but with courtesy. Okay, you gotta be professional. To stand up, you have to perform. You can't just give up. You have to perform, so they can't pull that against you. And the third thing is you've got to build trust. And that's a tough one. Okay, but we depend on it. Those people that were fighting the fire on the Baham Rashard had to trust each other. When those Marines and soldiers and airmen go into battle in Afghanistan, they've got to trust each other in the firefight. So you've got to, just as we have to trust each other in those environments, we got to learn to trust each other in this environment. And that means communicate. And it's tough and it ain't perfect. And I love the comments I'm seeing on the chat line here. And some of my answers, people will say, yeah, well, whatever. But I'm gonna tell you, that's what you got to do. You got to build that trust. You got to stand. You got to speak up.
All right, thanks a lot, Admiral. I'm being told we got to keep moving around here, or we're not going to get all of our guests in here. And our next guest is Michael Johnson. He's with the Munford Point Marine Association, officially founded in 1965, but it has its roots in World War II. You know, the Tuskegee Airmen get all the press, but this may be the most important veteran group that you may have never heard of. They fought in Okinawa, Iwo Jima, and other Pacific campaigns, all in a segregated military. The first chapters were created in 1965, and the group is still active today. Michael Johnson, tell me a little bit about your organization.
Yeah, no. Can you hear me?
I can. You're breaking up a little bit, but I think we're going to be good.
Okay. Yeah, Marines, of course, you know, we were the first African Americans to be allowed to join the Marine Corps in 1942, at the same time, along with the Tuskegee Airmen. And of course, we went through all of the racial disparities as everyone else went through. We had to prove ourselves as we were indoctrinated into the Marine Corps. We were treated just as anyone else in the Marine Corps, but being African American, you know, our motto was that we could not, I repeat, could not fail. And the whole mission of all the joint instructors when they trained these young men.
Michael, I think I'm going to have to stop you. I don't know if you can even hear me, but you're really breaking up really badly, so we're having a hard time understanding what you're saying. I'm going to kind of move on a little bit and maybe give him a bit of a chance to come back in. But actually, one of the things I wanted to talk about, and one of the things I want to address with Michael Johnson, since he's part of the veteran community, is like, what is the role that veterans group play in all of this? We talk about the number of African-American officers at the top ranks. That means somebody had to recruit them, somebody had to bring them into the system. And to my mind, veterans groups are like one of the biggest elements of that. They're the ones that have really show what the veteran community is all about. When you in the service, even if it's only for a few years, you're part of this lifelong coalition here that takes you all the way, you know, to the end of life. But it's not always inclusive and welcoming. I think we have a video or a photo here of something that happened just recently that I wanted to bring up. This is a case involving a private Navy SEAL museum in Florida. The video appeared online recently that showed a fundraiser where a military dog team used someone in a Kaepernick jersey as the attack dummy. The SEALs quickly and publicly suspended ties with the group. Still, if you're trying to recruit African Americans to the SEALs or naval special warfare, and the numbers are very low in special warfare as well, I'm not sure that you would want to put the kind of time and effort into that you would take to become a Navy SEAL if you feel this community doesn't really want you. So I'm going to reach out to the other veterans here on the panel, maybe starting with Admiral Harris. It's like, what is the veteran community prepared to shoulder part of this?
In my view, the veteran community is shouldering as much of it as they can. You know, these type of things you see in this picture. I mean, we see it. We see these type of deleterious and awful depictions all too often. The difference, I think, now is that people are beginning to be held accountable for them, and that's the change that has to happen. The number of examples in my mind are too many to go over right now. But the fact is that something like that, probably 20 years ago, nothing would ever have happened. 15 years ago, probably been swept under the rug. Today, it goes viral, and next thing you know, they had to do it. The Navy captain, a retired, who was caught saying the awful things he said on Facebook Live or whatever it was, and Messenger, and was dismissed. There's an example. We just have to keep people held accountable. And I think this is where the lawyer here, Colonel Christensen, probably can weigh in better than I can. That's going to be the key, holding people accountable.
But, you know, one of my questions is, when it comes to the veteran community, if this is an organization that prizes diversity, that's training people to work in diverse teams, how do they end up going back and we see examples of intolerance like this? And there are others where, including with the Kaepernick incident, where some of the large veteran organizations, they took a pretty conservative stance that doesn't seem to reflect the sort of full veteran community that's out there. So what's going on if we're teaching diversity at all levels in the military? Why aren't the veterans group like the most tolerant group of all the organizations? Anybody wait?
I don't believe they're training in diversity, but they're not educating anyone in diversity. And when you talk about the veteran community, you got to also look at the era in which they were in the military. Some of these guys was in during those times when we were dark green, light green, you know, where it was still somewhat segregated and certain people couldn't have certain positions. But also when you go back into society, you fall back into those groups. And then those behaviors come right back. You're not in that close proximity with your brothers and sisters anymore. So now you adopt the same mindset as those people that you're around, or because of accountability, because accountability is key in the military. However, once you put the actual the hammer down on a lot of people, they go underground. And they won't say too much overtly. They will do all their damage covertly. And when they get out, it comes right back to the surface. I've seen that numerous times. So that's why the veteran community kind of mirrors what happens in society.
Do you feel comfortable around your fellow vets most of the time?
Myself?
Yeah.
Yes. You know, I mean, it's just my demeanor and my mindset. I feel comfortable anywhere. You know, but I understand how to deal with those dynamics because I've been working in this field for over 10 plus years.
Okay.
So I understand. I understand how to deal with microaggressions. You know, I understand how to show certain body language and things like that. So they can kind of sense that I'm not an easy pushover with it, but I'm used to it. But not everybody wants to be in that environment too long.
Well, if you feel you have to adjust yourself, why would you want to hang around and be part of a community that doesn't seem?
Well, once you're out, you're a veteran, you know, and if I got to go in and deal with certain organizations, I have to deal with certain people like the VFW or going to the VA. You know, you hear all kind of things nowadays, you know, so I just know how to handle myself, you know, but again, it can be very difficult.
Okay. And I don't want to suggest that it's always a bad experience when you're dealing with the American Legion or the VFW or
It's not.
or any of the other mainline groups. But all right, so I don't want to paint with a broad brush. We got to move along. So we've got Don Christensen. He's the president of Protect Our Defenders. He's also a 23-year Air Force veteran, a colonel, and a military prosecutor. So your group sued the military, Don, to get statistics regarding race and the military criminal justice system. You found African Americans are more likely to face criminal charges and court-martial, even though they aren't convicted at a higher rate than any other soldiers or airmen. How bad is it, Don?
Well, thanks, Steve. It's actually really bad, and it's getting worse. So we've known for years, decades, that African Americans in the civilian world are probably prosecuted at a much greater rate than the whites were. But I don't think the military has actually had any kind of spotlight put on them and their disparities. So in 2016, Protect Our Defenders, which is a sexual assault advocacy organization, decide, well, let's look at the racial problem in the military. And so we asked each service for 10 years of data to show the disparity between whites, blacks, Hispanic, and others. We were able to eventually get that 10 years of data, put out a report in 2017 that showed each service had a huge racial disparity problem. Sadly for me, the Air Force had the worst. Young black airmen are about twice as likely to be prosecuted as or receive non-judicial punishment than a white airman is. For the Marine Corps, it's about 1.3, the Navy about 1.4 times more likely, for the Army about 1.6 times more likely.
And even if you're not ultimately convicted of a crime, this still has real consequences for your career and consequences that could go on throughout your whole life.
Oh yeah, this is upward mobility is one of the great benefits of the military, is that you can lift yourself up through education benefits, jobs, etc. What we see is when people get into the military justice system, or they get an administrative discharge, get a bad performance report because of an investigation, that is something that's going to affect them the rest of life. They lose the GI Bill, they often will get a discharge that's less than honorable, and that is something that follows you to your grave, literally. You know, if you don't get a fully honorable discharge, you lose so many benefits. And so we know that the African American community is investigated at a much higher rate, prosecuted at a much higher rate. Yeah, but what we don't know, but I'm 100% confident of, is what happens with the administrative part. Are they getting reprimands at a higher rate? Are they getting counseling at the higher rate? Are they getting poor a poor performance report at a higher rate? And I'm certain that they are.
But we still don't have all the statistics on that. And because of some of your efforts, Congress has now started to take a look at this.
Yeah, exactly. So when we released a report in 2017, we got a lot of media interest in it, and we got a lot of congressional interest in it. And Congress required investigation by the Government Accountability Office. They got much better access to data than we did, but they basically verified what we found. That report came out in 2019. Sadly, the GAO asked all of the services, what are you doing about the racial disparity problem? And all of the services admitted they were doing nothing. And now this is something they've known about since at least the 70s. Congress passed more legislation requiring now the services to report what they're doing and how they're going to address racial disparities.
And from the data that you collected, how often were African Americans, for how many years have African Americans led with the number of cases involving military justice? How often do African Americans lead everyone else in the military?
Well, it's always. So we had 32 years of data, and it literally every year there was a significant disparity between blacks and whites. And sadly, even though we have a lot of ways to go in America, we are better race relations we were in the 60s. But in the military, the disparity is getting worse, not better. And that to me was pretty startling that that was bad. The military themselves has admitted that they've known this since 1972.
And just, to make clear on this point, it's not just, whether you're convicted of a crime, but this can lead to somebody getting gigged early on and being part of the military justice system. That can impact whether or not how far you're going to rise in the ranks, even years later. If you get out of the military, this is going to be on job applications. This could impact security clearance. A lot of people leave the military and then go on to work in the defense industry and the like, and other parts of the federal government. You may not be able to get a security clearance right away. This literally does follow you for the rest of your life.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's one of the things that was really concerning to me. One of my motivations for doing this, the Supreme Court has above its doors equal justice under law. And I definitely knew we'd had that problem in the military. The people are supposed to be ensuring that wasn't happening. And so, for a young Black man or Black woman who is facing what they view and very often discrimination, that's not equal justice. And that is something that drives them out, something that, as you said, security clearance can be lost. If you get a general discharge, you're not going to get a job in the federal government. You get it under other than honorable conditions discharge, you're going to have a hard time getting a job. So it's a lifetime stigma.
So I'm going to ask you the question that you can't answer. How do you fix this?
Yeah, well, that's great. When I asked for the data, it was to show the problem, not how do you solve it. The disappointing thing to me was, we released our report in 2017 and the military did nothing. And then the GAO released their report in 2019, the military did nothing. Then we released our report May 27th of this year, and the follow-up showing that they had done nothing. And that was 2 days after Mr. Floyd was murdered. And I think those two events really caused the military to look at this. And I think that's the key. They have been not acknowledging it, and now they are acknowledging it. Hopefully that's going to move somewhere. Congressional oversight is really critical, and Congress has had a hearing on this, and I'm guessing going to have annual hearings to see how it's moving forward.
To be completely blunt, how white is the military justice system?
It's incredibly white. So when I retired from the Air Force in 2014, in December, we had 124 colonels. One of them was African American. And for me, it was very frustrating because JAG Corps leadership seemed to be fine with the fact, hey, we're not racist, we have one Black guy. Well, we needed a lot more. And I know of no Black judges currently serving in the Air Force. I've heard there's no Black judges serving in the Navy. It's a real problem. Yeah,
no, I was just told that recently, that there are 0 African-American judges in the Navy at this point. So no top admirals, no top admirals, and no judges. We've got just probably about a minute here for a jump ball question. And so what is it that stands in the way of allowing the military to become the real model for diversity, which is, in many ways, that's how people see our military, as everyone in this country coming together as one. Somebody want to tackle that in under a minute?
Accountability. We have to hold people accountable for racist actions, for improper evaluations, for poor judgment. It's accountability. We hold ourselves accountable for fires, for collisions, for groundings. We have to hold people accountable for this.
Okay, that is where we're going to leave it here. On behalf of KPBS and American Homefront, I want to thank our guests. Unfortunately, Michael Johnson, who was with the Munford Point Marine Association, I'm so sorry we couldn't get you on here. Stefan Williams, owner of HABU Leadership Development, Don Christensen with Protect Our Defenders, and Admiral Sinclair Harris. This event will be available on YouTube. There should be a link on the KPBS website in a little bit here. And join us next Thursday at 6 o'clock Pacific time when we take a look at white supremacy in the US military. I hope to see all of you. I'm Steve Walsh. Thank you so much for everybody who participated.